Hello and welcome back to another episode of Hear the Cannons, presented by Bucks Game Day, Sports Illustrated's only website dedicated specifically to covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I am Colin Hallboom, a writer for Bucks Game Day, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Caleb Skinner. Make sure, before we get going on this episode, make sure you're checking out bucksgameday.com and make sure to like and subscribe the channel on YouTube, rate and review wherever you get your podcast. We greatly appreciate it. Now, we have a special guest for this evening, the draft god himself, Thor Nystrom, who is an NFL draft and college football analyst for Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros. You can follow him at ThorKU on Twitter. I've had the pleasure of speaking with Thor each of the past few draft classes, and Thor absolutely crushes it. He knows every player that's drafted and a whole bunch who aren't. Thor, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me. Always good to talk to you. It's becoming a yearly tradition at this point. So excited to get into the Bucks class.
No doubt, man. And like Thor, I got to at least personally take a second to reflect on last season because among a number of hits you had as an evaluator, my favorite was you desperately trying to warn GMs, both fantasy and reality, that they were sleeping on Puka Nacua. So kudos to you, man. You deserve some flowers for that one.
Thanks. Yeah, I wish my Vikings the management had listened to me about that one, but I appreciate that shout out. Thanks for remembering.
No doubt, man. You had good things to say about Kalijah Cansey as well. You missed some games early on, but ended up producing very well among rookies. I mean, he finished top 10 in sacks, second in TFLs, and proved to be a better than advertised run defender as well. So you gave us a lot of the goods on him last year. Same with Yaya Diaby, who the team's third round pick. He led all rookies in TFLs. And he was third in sacks. So lots of good stuff there. I got to toot your horn one more time. Christian Izzian was a guy you warned us about. You said he was really solid. He ended up starting a bunch of games. So for any of you who aren't familiar with Thor's work, you definitely want to be tuned in and listening to what he says because he has the best insight in the business. Now, Thor, I want to ask, I'm just going to come off the top. Looking at this Buccaneers draft class 2024, who is your favorite pick and what was your least favorite pick? And maybe we can just use that as a platform to talk a bit about those guys.
I'd say my favorite pick, I would have to go. This is going to be cheating, but it would be between Barton and Jalen McMillan. I'm a big fan of Jalen McMillan, so I have to shout him out. I'd say those two, but I love the Barton pick as well.
Yeah. So tell us about your evaluation of Graham Barton. Like, what does he do well, and where could he potentially get exposed at the NFL level, keeping in mind the Bucs plan to start him at center? So that's the plan for him.
And I ranked him as a center. Obviously, in the pre-draft process, he got a lot of work there. And, the idea with him is potentially even have break glass in case of emergency, 5-position versatility with him. Obviously, the last couple of years at Duke, the ACC, he was a stud left tackle. But of course, as you guys by now know, he was a starting center at the beginning of his time at Duke. So he could really do any of it. But I thought that the best projection for him was either to center or to guard. But I think he's got a guy that certainly, like I said, if it's an emergency situation as far as like injuries, you absolutely could kick him out to tackle. He's just so rock solid, Graham Barton. And he did it for so many years. Like there's this idea like in storytelling of like closing the doors where like, all the counter or in the courtroom, you close all the doors and you make it an airtight argument. With the amount of guys, top level competition that Graham Barton went up against over those years and at these various different spots, and he excelled throughout. By the time he got to the draft process, most of the doors had already been closed for me on him. I just saw him as an exceedingly high floor guy. And then to go on the draft process over 6'5", 2/8, 311, and then to have the testing that he did, which was he surprised me with how well he tested. His RAS was 999. Between all that stuff, it's like I don't have any questions anymore. I don't know that I had any heading in, but I definitely don't now. I ranked him 20th on my board. Anywhere around there would have been a good pick. To get him at 26, especially. People out there got to keep in mind the environment we were in on Thursday night where you had the historical fluke anomaly of 14 straight offensive guys going off the board to begin it. The previous record was 7 straight to begin. And it was a lot of that. You had the two, we'll be nice and call them wonky decisions with out in Atlanta and Denver with their quarterback decisions, which pulled that up. But then the other thing, of course, was with the offensive line, and I think what evaluators had sort of gauge the three-dimensional chess heading in was everyone knew that there was the really good offensive lineman on top. But I think in addition to that, the other factor that caused some of those guys to go higher was you had a bigger qualitative drop off after that initial group to the next one. So when teams were looking at their buckets and needs, the ones that need the offensive line there in the first round, they were prioritizing that over maybe even some guys that they on the defensive side, for instance, that would have been ranked slightly ahead of it. But it's like when you're doing the three-dimensional math on it, it's like in the next round, we could project that we're going to get the better player at this ancillary position. Whereas if we have to go offensive line on day 2, there's the bigger drop off. So you're adding the two together and it's like, all of a sudden it makes more sense to start grabbing the offensive lineman. That was the environment that we were in. And for the Bucs to be able to, at 26, grab a guy like Barton, where I literally think at least 4 positions and maybe 5 in the NFL, if you put him in right away, he's going to be a good starter there. Certainly going to be an above average, really good starter, I think, for a long time. But to get that guy at 26, and then, of course, he's projected in as the day 1 starter there at center with Tampa Bay, and he's going to do a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we move on from Barton. Obviously, it was a need for the Buccaneers to get some offensive line help there. They also needed help to get pressure to the quarterback. Nealon went like a pick right before them, so he wasn't available there. Do you think necessarily that the Bucs really reached there to get Braswell out of the University of Alabama? Obviously, we know he didn't get a lot of playing time while he was there up until, his last season. But he was, highly productive during the times that he was on the field. What are your thoughts with Braswell? Do you think the Bucs necessarily reached there, or, was that drop off that big of a gap from Braswell to the guys following him?
Definitely not a reach on Braswell. He was 55th on my board. They got him 57th. And I don't have the consensus board in front of me, but I have to assume it was somewhere around there, somewhere in the latter half of the second round, where he would have ended up on that thing. That's where we knew Braswell was going to go in the late second round. I mean, like, that's just the profile of a guy like that's going to go there. The only thing that I think you could, I did like Nealon more. I had Nealon, maybe 33rd, 34th, 35th, somewhere like that on my board. I just like his game. I like the way that he plays. So you could, potentially argue maybe they should have been more proactive, moving up a couple spots. But who knows? Maybe they like Braswell more than Nealon. And like I said, just objectively, the slot, that is more than fair value. Braswell, it's not with him. It's not taking him there. It's not a shot on upside. It's the opposite. You're getting a guy, exactly what he is, right? He is that downhill attacking edge defender, get after the quarterback, and then also can help out in the run game as well. But it's sort of that sort of one trick utility, and decent athlete, and certainly north-south is where his athleticism particularly plays up. But he's been well coached. He knows what he's doing. And he gets on top of you quick, and then he just starts throwing the kitchen sink. And the thing that I mentioned, I like Nealon. I love like the hair on fire like style that he has. Braswell, it's like a never say die, like leave on the sword kind of a dude. Like he's coming, when the whistle, right? Like he's just that sort of dude. The effort is always there. It's just the utility with him and the usage. It's more or less limited to attack downhill. But whatever, like that's exactly where that dude should have gone, and he's going to be playing for a long time in the NFL.
Thor, do you think he's like he's another similar to Barton, I guess, like a high floor guy, right?
Yes.
If you could describe him as that high floor player. So is his ceiling? Is it as a starter, or is he someone you envision being just a really steady rotational pass rusher?
Starter, as long as you just keep them to that utility, right? Like the thing where you get concerned about a guy like that is if the team that takes him doesn't understand some of the limitations of his game, where it's on the other end. Like, I don't want to see Chris Braswell having to chase people with the back to his quarterback out in coverage. Then we're gonna have problems. But as long as, again, they're just deploying him that way, attacking downhill, he is a plus as both a pass rusher, limited. It's capped. Right, like he's not the bend him like Beckham type edge rusher, right? Like he's not going to do any fireworks with the athleticism, but he has enough of the north-south stuff, the quick first step, and then the speed to power thing. and then the relentlessness, and then that stuff plays as well in run defense. So is he going to be a superstar? No, but like what you're buying, like you mentioned, it's that higher floor where this is a guy that can contribute immediately, and in that specific downhill attack thing, he could be a starter for a while. And I appreciate him for what he was.
Yeah, it sounds like it, and I think Bucs fans will appreciate that. Like that, they want a grinder like that who's going to come in and be relentless, and it sounds like Braswell will be that guy. I want to move forward to the Bucs third round selection, and I'm really curious to get your thoughts on this. They took Tyke Smith, safety out of Georgia, 89th overall, more of a versatile DB, let's call him. And by all indications, the Bucs drafted him to compete for the starting nickel position right away. Yet he still has the potential, to shift to safety, end up being the guy opposite Antoine Winfield down the line, potentially. Todd Bowles loves versatility. He loves guys who, as you said earlier, play with their hat on fire. Seems like Tyke Smith's that kind of dude from the defensive backfield. Talk to us about his ceiling and floor as an NFL player based on what you saw on tape and where you think he would be best utilized at the NFL level, Thor.
It's another high floor guy, right? Like, I mean, the nickel thing is where I would play him. Now, this year, for the first time, I broke apart centers and guards. I used to do just IOL. I might have to start doing that with the nickel guys, because some of them, this is outside of Tyke Smith, but just like, because there's some guys that just should be in the nickel, right? And then, but like, it's like, do you rank them as a safety? Do you rank them as a cornerback? And then sometimes it's like, you have to figure that out. But like Tyke Smith's just a nickel guy, and there's a whole bunch of other guys in this class where they're just nickel guy. But he's going to be a good starter there, or at least a reliable starter there. I like his play style. He's obviously capped by the size and 74th percentile athleticism. Not a great athlete. He super duper sawed off. At least he's muscular within that package. It's like more of like a muscle hamster type nickel defender, I suppose you would say. But he goes down, he helps in run support. And as long as you're not leaving him out where he's how would you say, athletic trump carded by another receiver, because he just doesn't have the athleticism or the size for some of those coverage responsibilities. And you saw Georgia's defensive staff was super smart, and they would keep him mostly out of these things. But there was a couple times, game in and game out, play in and play out. You can't, on the defensive side, you're not always going to get the matchups ideal every single time. Lassiter, who played on the outside there, a couple of times he got isolated against a speed guy, took his lunch money deep. That's his. He got to play nickel at the next level as well. It's whatever. But with Tyke, it's a more natural fit. Like Lassiter, in my opinion, I think it was the Texans that took Lassiter. My opinion, they overdrafted that guy. I know that he had fans, but he's good with the lateral stuff and he's fluid. But it's like lacks that foot speed. But with Tyke, as long as it's just like nickel, that's where you're headed. That's what you're going to do. That's where his game's going to play up. That's where I would just keep him going forward.
His aggressiveness and like physicality was quite a weapon despite his size, right? Matching up against tight ends, like he's got that in his bag. So I think with how the tight end position functions now in the NFL, a lot of those guys are big receivers. So Tyke Smith's going to come in handy in that sense.
For sure. Yeah. It's just the only guys you want to keep. It's like in that scenario, it's the long angular ones down the seam where those would be the only ones where it would be an issue just with the height, of like the jump ball thing. But like you can do it, what your matchup is heading into the week. Right. And so there's just these couple of different coverage things where it's like he's got all the skill that he needs. Right. It's just there's some of those guys as far as their long levers and the balls that they can get to and stuff where you're going to be putting them in a bad spot just slightly under 5'10". Match up against some guys like that, but you're not bullying that guy, right? I mean, it's in a lot of cases going to be the other way around. Like he's one of them like super feisty guys, and you like him by the ball there too, right? In the nickel, it's like you're closer there, you can come down and help and run support. He's happy to do that as well. But there's just some situation specific things if you can work around that and it's why I for me, I ended up dinging him a little bit, maybe too much. Like on my grading, I ranked him 124th on my board, and I do like his game. But like I said, there's just a couple of these things where the ceiling is capped a little bit, and then game in and game out, week in and week out, you just the usage thing in the passing game, you just have to monitor the guy who's going to be across from him once he is in the nickel, or maybe you move him back in those instances. Like the kid's football IQ is very high. So like to your thing about, can he bounce back? Absolutely. He can play deep situationally as well.
Yeah, I think he's just kind of, Todd Bowles' guy. Like he was like, this is the mold that Todd Bowles likes from whether it's safety and nickel, a guy who can stand up against bigger guys. Very solid, might be a little shorter on that aspect of things. But moving on to the second, third round pick for the Buccaneers, and one of your favorite picks that the Bucs made is wide receiver Jalen McMillan. Kind of got lost in Washington because you had Rome Odunze, you had Jalen Polk. So there's a lot of balls that need to go around to a lot of different guys, and not to mention the injuries that kind of plagued him a bit last year. But we all saw what he was able to do in that semifinal game, which was unbelievable, really stood out to a lot of people. What are your thoughts on McMillan? What makes him, one of your favorite picks there for the Bucs in the whole entire draft?
Yeah, so last year during the draft process last spring, for like 2 months, I was arguing with people about, you guys remember when we went into that process and Jalen Hyatt was seen as a first round guy, and then no one was really talking about Cedric Tillman of Tennessee, the 2 Tennessee receivers. Mm-hmm. And I argued till I was blue in the face that Cedric Tillman was a better player and a better prospect than Jalen Hyatt, and that the only reason that people thought any different was just because Cedric Tillman had gotten injured his last season, which wiped him off the depth chart. It allowed Jalen Hyatt against this small stretch of crappy opponents. It was like Akron and some other like lower level opponents. And then even when they played Alabama, when Tillman was out, Hyatt got free releases. This is probably, Nick Saban would probably tell you, this is one of his bigger schematic boo-boos of all time. He was matching up DeMarco Helms in the slot, but off 10 yards back against Hyatt in that game. So Hyatt got the free releases. He would DeMarco Helms, he puts on shoes that have been caked in concrete before. Like he lacks foot speed. So it's like, yeah, obviously he's going to get behind DeMarco Helms. So anyway, that was the reason you went into the draft process, and Cedric Tillman, whenever he was on the field with Jalen Hyatt, was their clear number one guy and was the guy they put out there at the X, and the opposing team would shift coverage resources there. Their CB1, it was clear who Tennessee wanted to go to. It was clear who the opponent wanted to take away. And Hyatt's only stretch of his career that was good was in the immediate aftermath of when Tillman had gotten injured. That's the exact same situation that we find ourselves in with Jalen McMillan against Jalen Polk. The New England fans are mad at me. I had to go because I gave New England an F for their, I give out 2 Fs every year as far as my bell curve thing. And so I've had to answer on, WEEI and some, I don't know, all the radio stations out there, but, I had to go on these different things and then answer for my Patriots grade. And one of the ones that they want to talk about is this take that I have that Jalen Polk wouldn't have gone above where they're like, how could you rank him as a late 4th round guy? And my take, that's generous for him, because if Jalen McMillan never gets injured, I don't believe that Jalen Polk even goes there. Right. So it's like, sure, he showed in the next 5 games. So I'll be kind on his evaluation. I'll add that in, whatever. But Jalen Polk was always the clear and distant wide receiver 3 in that offense, an afterthought, total afterthought when Jalen McMillan was healthy. Just some stats on this. Over the last 2 years, when McMillan and Polk were on the field together for the full game, there was 20 of them. In those 20 games, Jalen McMillan stats, 124 catches, 1,657 yards, 14 touchdowns. Jalen Polk stats in those 20 games, 68 catches, 1,210 yards, 9 touchdowns. And Polk goes 55 slots ahead of Jalen McMillan. And by the way, the next level, I think they play the same position. I don't think that Jalen Polk can play on the outside. I think he has to be the efficiency slot guy. I prefer Jalen McMillan all day over Jalen Polk. If I was an NFL general manager, I would have selected Jalen McMillan above Jalen Polk. I believe that Jalen McMillan, again, going back to, he's a better player and he's a better prospect, my opinion. Now, he is capped to the slot, but I think Mr. Polk is as well. But just, enough of crapping on Jalen Polk. McMillan is on the other side. Polk got overrated for this. McMillan, it was artificially, his stock in the way that people saw him, it was artificially deflated just because of this knee injury that he suffers in September. And I think it was 8 games, the next 8 games, he either missed all of them or The vast majority. Jalen McMillan's tough as nails. He tried to come back for 2 games in October. Forget which ones they were. I have it here somewhere. Stanford and Oregon. He tried to play with his knee injury, and he cut on a route, and it was like the first one against Stanford, and he immediately comes out. It's like I tried, but like it's not the the knee was not holding up. In terms of with that, and then he tried to do it again against Oregon. It's the exact same thing. He went out there. It's like the thing of like he's a game time decision, and McMillan's the guy that's going to tell the coach is going to come up to him after warm ups and be like, Jalen, how is it feeling out there? Every single time you're going to be like, good to go, coach. But on the field, obviously, like it has to, be good enough so that you can do that cutting and play up the route running aspect of your game. He couldn't do it in those 2 games. He doesn't end up coming back for real for a full game till it was November 25th against Wazoo. But during that period, that was when Polk's ripping it up, when McMillan's out of the lineup. McMillan comes back at the end. Guess who becomes a wide receiver 2 again? Right away. Mr. Jalen McMillan. This is during the aspect of their schedule where Washington was marching to, as you guys know, the College Football National Championship. Polk goes right back to afterthought status. There was 2 games down there in November where Jalen Polk played the full game, was healthy, and had 0 catches. But as far as McMillan's game, you're talking about a slot receiver there, very reliable, very crafty. This is something that sort of goes under, it doesn't get talked about as much with the receivers because you're talking about like their athleticism and all the sort of sparkle stuff. But the guys who can denote the coverage right away and then do the correct thing without any wasted moments or beats or like whatever their games always play up. And he's that dude. He's going to tell right away, is this zone coverage going to find the open spot? I'm open for the quarterback. And then in the man coverage concepts, he can shake you too. Very, very clever route runner. And he has the burst as well with the acceleration of into the cuts, into the route breaks, the efficiency of the footwork into that. He can keep you off the beat of the sun up till then. Then he has the efficiency of footwork into those and then can accelerate quick out. I love all that stuff about his game. And that's why he's going to pile up the targets, my opinion, next level as a starting slot. You have the capped ceiling with him again. I suppose we could argue this is another one where it's the high floor. I just think it's a way higher floor than people were giving him credit for, and a higher ceiling as well. Because I see that guy as starting in the NFL in the slot for 8 to 10 years. I don't know how you get him off the field.
I think the Bucs have already come out and said that they're moving Chris Godwin back into the slot. So that kind of creates a question mark there. Is he going to be... Because
of Palmer they want to play Palmer on the outside.
Do they want to play Palmer on the outside?
Is that McMillan what it is?
Or McMillan can maybe, garner some of those snaps from Palmer. So is that something that you could see McMillan possibly excelling in, or will he just kind of be an okay wide receiver there on the outside? And this is more obviously could be a backup for if Godwin decides to leave in free agency following this year.
McMillan's just a slot. In my opinion, you're pressing him out there. What I would say to that is everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Mike Tyson. And that's what I would tell to Trey Palmer. I think he's the guy. Like, of course, going into camp, you're like, we want to keep the speed element on the field, and I get that, right? Like, and helps out with spacing and stuff. But if you're going to do that, if that's what it's going to be, and it's like, that's our idea at least heading in. So then that's why we're trying to facilitate it for Godwin. That's your plan heading in. But I think what it's actually going to come down to is a decision in camp of what is the best for, like, how is our offense going to function better with McMillan in the slot, Godwin staying on the outside, or, you switch Godwin to the inside, then you have Palmer on the outside. McMillan's a better player than Trey Palmer, in my opinion. You might have to sacrifice that speed. And I know that there's, with Godwin, there's 1 year left on the deal, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and maybe, you could do the mix and matching thing, right? Where you have and we see this more and more in the NFL every single year, where it's like their usage, it's not 100% on the boundary and 0% in the slot. You see way more of these guys where it's like, 60-40 or, some of these different percentages. Maybe with Godwin, they use him as like the guy because they know he can do both. You switch him inside some looks, maybe we get more speed on the field here. Maybe then we get the rook in on the slot for the more efficiency, because McMillan, his thing, it's not Palmer's going to give you the explosive plays when he can hold on to the ball. That was of course his issue in college. But he's the efficiency stuff is with Palmer. That's where the ball skills and the flubbing can come in over the aggregate. With McMillan, he's going to paper cut you all day. Like you just know that's there, and he I would say that, like the explosive thing, of course, that's Palmer's. I think McMillan has a bit more downfield utility than people give him credit for, but I wouldn't try him on, like, for me, that he's just a slot. That's the one thing that capped the ceiling with McMillan, but he can stretch the seam because he has the good vertical acceleration and he knows how to stack people. He's also good at tracking the ball. So, like, but again, like, you're probably looking at a 4-receiver thing. They have the plan heading in, but that could change real quick if Jalen McMillan impresses in camp and demands to be on the field. Now you might have to switch Godwin back out there. Now maybe Mr. Palmer's the 4th receiver.
Well, thankfully, we know Chris Godwin has that positional versatility. And if Jalen McMillan doesn't, then, maybe they're going to end up quickly realizing he belongs there, because you seem pretty passionate about the fact that, that's where he is at his best. And it's what you want to do if you're going to utilize your guys. Now, I'm not sure if we'll be able to get to every guy from the Bucs draft pick, Thor, because I know you got to get out of here in a little bit. But in the 4th round, the Buccaneers selected Bucky Irving out of Oregon. This year's running back class, I find, had a wide array of rankings based on draft prognosticators, man. Like, there were a whole bunch of different reads compared to recent years. What do you think of this pick? How do you think Bucky Irving can complement a back like Rachaad White, who I know you've been very fond of, especially as a pass catcher, dating back to previous guest hits you've done with us? What are your thoughts on Bucky Irving? What does he do well? Does he complement Rachaad White?
With Irving, it's all going to come down to his lack of athleticism in that smaller package. Is it nullifying? Like with Kyron Williams, we all decided, yeah, it's nullifying, until it wasn't. And it's like, and with Bucky, we'll have to see. The one thing I know that for sure, two things I know for sure Bucky can't do. He's not a good pass blocker. He's going to get run over. You need to not have him doing that. And then the other thing, running between the tackles, he was good at that at Oregon because he's very slippery. And he has a good feel for what he's doing. So he'll set people up and then make them miss. The NFL level, though, I don't know if he can run between the tackles. If that specific, usage pattern will hold over where that skill would be translate 1-to-1. I do think everyone knows this. He's a very good receiver. So, like, that's the element of his game for sure that plays at the next level. But like you mentioned, Rachaad White's a skilled receiver as well. I was surprised the Bucs took him where they did. Bucky, they obviously were big fans of him. I wouldn't have taken him quite that high, and particularly if I was the Bucs, because you already have a dude that can do that. Like, I thought the team that would, maybe, at least in my opinion, pull up on the price tag of Bucky Irving, that it would be the team where it's like, we got the early down grinder fella, but we really need the pass. We need the running back for the passing game as the receiver. I'm interested to see how they end up using those guys, but I love Bucky's game in college, but I need to see it in the NFL with the size that he has. And then, 5'9", 192, 22nd percentile athlete. Like I said, I comped him to Dion Lewis. The receiving element of that is going to play at the next level, but I'm very curious to see how they mix and match him with Rachaad early on.
A lot of Bucs fans were hoping more for like a Audric Estime type of back to pair with Rachaad, right? If we're talking,
I think that would have made more sense, honestly, for sure. Yeah.
Well, they definitely like something about him. So I think, Thor, like, if you have any thoughts on either Elijah Klein or Devin Culp, good or bad, before we let you hop out of here, we'd love to get it. Those are the Bucs' last 2 picks. The floor is yours, man, before we get you out of here.
Yeah, the way I saw Klein was a potential backup. Like he's like a grinder guy, and was reliable at UTEP. Played a whole bunch. I think he was like 50 plus games that he started at UTEP, but there's just some limitations there with the overall profile, athletic limitations, etc. But he's a guy for sure that could hang around, but it would just be as a backup. It's cap ceiling thing. Devin Culp was a hard eval for me because he was the fastest tight end in the class, and on his better reps, it's like, oh, this guy could really be something as the pass guy. He can't block at all. So it's just that aspect of it. And he's a little over 6'3", 231. So it's like, it has to be in the H-backy thing, or you can put him in the slot. And you have the speed. And then, sometimes you'll see him extend out and make like a really sick catch. But then other times it's like his ball skills. It's like flip a coin with it. Because then there's other times where he's like, he lets the ball come too close into his frame, and then he's throwing his hands up at the last second and, trying to like swat like we kill mosquitoes here in Minnesota, clap that thing in. And it's like, what, bro, why aren't you doing the extend out and attack the ball thing that I saw last quarter? Why are you, it's hard to explain, but it's like, you can't really say it's a technique thing, because there are times where he goes out and attacks the ball. And then there's these other times where, I don't know what he's doing with it, with the technique of it. And so he flubbed some balls that should have been pretty easy because of this. That's something that the Buccaneers coaches need to get into and investigate, because if you can just fix that thing, or you can, the consistency of it, of the times where the technique gets really wonky at the catch point, that's the way that you'll be able to improve the percentage of looks that he reels in, which allows you to leverage that super fast package in the bigger, or the speed in the bigger package with him. So something to work on. And if it doesn't work out with him, I mean, you use the 246 pick on him. That's right where he was on my board. If you can't figure that aspect out, you got to cut him, but it doesn't cost anything. So
got it. Well, Thor, I think on that note, you've given you jam pack information, man, into the amount of time you give us, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate having you on the show, man, to give Bucs fans a real in-depth, objective, unbiased opinion on these draft picks, man. You're the best when it comes to that. Can't thank you enough, dude. And for anyone who doesn't know, at ThorKU, great Twitter follow. All of his work is at Betting Pros, Fantasy Pros, anything NFL draft, college football. Thor's got you covered. Dude, how many comps did you do this year? Like, how many players did you comp?
It was so 500 for the board, but then there was some more in the position rankings. It probably ended up being closer to 600 total.
Wow. We love it, man. So generous with your time. Thank you, Thor. Be well. I look forward to hopefully continuing this tradition and getting you again next year, man.
You got it. Count on it. Good talking to you again, brother. Appreciate it,
buddy. All right, folks, there you have it. Thor Nystrom, gracious enough to give us his time and his opinions, for which we are greatly appreciative. Now, Caleb, a couple Bucs items I think we can talk about before we get ourselves out of here and enjoy the rest of our Thursday evenings. First one, man. Jason Light made an appearance on the Pat McAfee show today, for anyone who doesn't know. Of course, Pat McAfee wanted to get Jason Light going, and he brought up the fact that Bucs being disrespected. He talked about the Falcons being the favorites. And, you got to love Jason Light, man. This guy shows way more personality than most GMs, because he doesn't hold back. He talks about keeping the receipts. They were joking about the interaction he had at the combine with Connor Orr. I believe it was Connor Orr from Sports Illustrated. Jason Light just
gave him two wins last year.
That's right. The guy who predicted 2 wins. So first off, you got it. Like, do you agree? Are you with me on this? Like, Jason Light is unique, man, and how he hams it up with the media and is just like so forthcoming as like a dude. He doesn't think he's above people.
Yeah, I it's awesome seeing him go on a show like Pat McAfee and just opening up. Just being like going above and beyond what a normal GM would say. You don't, like, most GMs aren't going to go on Pat McAfee in the first place, yet alone cuss on there. Make it known that he keeps receipts, give examples of keeping receipts, and then be like, no, it's totally wrong. Like, we're disrespected every single year. That's how it is. We were disrespected before Brady, even when we had Brady, we were kind of disrespected because, like, nobody looks at us. We got Levante David, future Hall of Famer. We've got Mike Evans, who's a future Hall of Famer. Like, obviously there's no reason we should be disrespected, but we are. And it's just kind of become the norm, for Buccaneers fans, for the organization. So it's just something they accept. They walk around with a chip on their shoulder, that kind of, I don't give a attitude, and we're going to go out there and play ball. And that's kind of how Jason Light, just carries himself as well. And it's just awesome to see that, we've got a GM over in Tampa Bay and Raymond James Stadium at One Buck Place that just, is cool. He's just a down-to-earth dude. Goes around the Tampa Bay area as well. So I love having him. I thought it was awesome. seeing his comments there with Pat McAfee. So it was pretty, not really eye-opening because we know what Jason's going to bring, but to a lot of other people, they don't get to see that every day like we do. So great stuff from him.
Something a little more eye-opening maybe is the outright optimism that Jason Light mentioned on that same appearance earlier today regarding Antoine Winfield Jr.'s contract status. When they asked him, like, where are those contract discussions at? Pat McAfee asked him. He was very clear that they're close, and he mentioned going on a family trip in July, and he would like to have it all sorted out before then in terms of Antoine Winfield Jr. being extended. Of course, he's not going to give us a ton more info than that, but he did say that Antoine's the best safety in the NFL, and he deserves to be paid like it. So great news, music to the ears of Bucs fans. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that assessment. I mean, at least around these parts, whether he's the best all-around safety in the NFL is certainly a more nuanced discussion. But the fact that he's out there vouching for a guy, talking up his players, meanwhile he's in negotiations with them, is another example of how awesome Jason Light is.
Yeah, he's just a dude. Like, he's just a guy. Like, if Jason like had the body of an NFL player, he'd probably be on the field instead of being a GM. But I mean, Antoine Winfield, all pro last year, which was great to see after being snubbed from the Pro Bowl. Probably was this second best safety in the league last year. Has kind of bloomed since his rookie year after he kind of took over that starting role in the Super Bowl season. So just seeing him continue to make plays, he does deserve to get paid. And there's a guy on the offensive line that also deserves to get paid. So they're going to have, these conversations, but these are the type of guys that they want around the organization. Not only a good player on the field, but also great representation of the franchise as well. And that's kind of what Antoine Winfield is. He's going to get paid. It's only a matter of time. They're willing to shell out the money for him because of what he does bring each and every single game is just amazing. So seeing Jason Light be very open about it is got to be refreshing to Buccaneers fans' ears for sure.
Now, number of Buccaneers coaches held press conferences this week, and I found it very interesting, particularly as it relates to the starting left guard position for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because the addition of Graham Barton, you got two bookend tackles, of course, Tristan Wirfs and Luke Gedeke. We now have Graham Barton in the middle, right? And I think Cody Mock is looking really good at right guard. So it's a puzzle. I wrote about this for Bucs Game Day. It should be up on the site. Like, I went in it a little deeper than I had expected, but like, it's about that. It's a puzzle, right? It's a challenging puzzle to assemble an offensive line, a competent one. And the Bucs have been missing it since the unexpected retirements of Ryan Jensen and prior to that, Ali Marpet. Ali Marpet was their last reliable stud left guard. And I mean, hot diggity, was he was beyond reliable. Like, he was an all-pro caliber left guard. So there's no question the Bucs are not going to have an all-pro caliber left guard this season. But the question is, will they have at least a serviceable starter who isn't going to hurt them, right? A lot of people say your O-line's only as good as your weakest link. Anyway, back to what I was saying with these press conferences. So Bucs O-line coach Kevin Carberry used to be with the Saints, and Liam Cohen, both, in my opinion, offered quite a statement in support of one of the players who will be vying for that spot. So in terms of the guys who are under consideration, one would imagine, for the starting left guard spot, you got Ben Bredesen, free agent acquisition, Sua Opeta, free agent acquisition, and then Elijah Klein, who we just talked about with Thor, 6th-round draft pick out of UTEP, who a lot of people, which is natural around draft season, a lot of Bucs fans start looking through the highlights. Oh, can he be our starter? Can he be that dude? Maybe, but like, not super likely. And then you got Robert Hainsey, right? Bob Hainsey was at center last year, a below average center, I would say, but he played admirably. Like, he was all right. And he's got lots of versatility and experience too. Like, he's played guard. So between those guys, I'm like, it's kind of anyone's guess. However, the comments made by Carberry and Cohen this week have convinced me that Sua Opeta, the free agent acquisition, he's like 6'4", 300 and something pounds, who's been in Philly, is that guy who they are envisioning, because in both of their press conferences, both those coaches went out of their way to really praise Sua Opeta. Carberry said he is absolutely going to be a starter in this league. Like, that is about as big of a hint as you can get, or he's deserving of it. And it makes sense. Like, Philly's had one of the best O-lines in the NFL over the past several seasons. So, of course, just because Opeta, who is undrafted, initially at a Weber State like 4 years ago, 2019, I think. So 5. But like, just because he wasn't playing and didn't crack the roster, you got to look at the situation. And the situation being the Philadelphia Eagles, one of the deepest, most talented offensive line groups. Well, then it makes sense Opeta didn't play that much. He still managed to start 10 games though, with injury backing up Cam Jurgens. So, and then Liam Cohen was asked specifically about the left guard position, and he only mentioned one guy's name in terms of who the competition to start for that position, and that name was Sua Opeta. So, connecting the tea leaves, that was a little bit of a long-winded way to say my belief is that Sua Opeta is the guy in-house who they're expecting to be a starter, and they believe has starter capabilities. So, just saying.
mean, when you get it straight from the coach's mouth, it's kind of hard to go against that, Colin. Let's just say. But you got to kind of feel here for Hainsey. You gotta know that he's done everything for this Buccaneers team when it comes to filling in whatever role he may need to along the offensive line when it's come to injuries, filling in for center, and doing all that. But one of these guys is going to be the odd man out, right? So they've got 4 guys really vying for, a position or maybe a position and a half to be a backup for in other guard spots. So it'll be very intriguing to see kind of what transpires over the course of training camp, because Hainsey can still, work in that center position too with Barton. So if Hainsey really wants to hold down a job, prove that you're better than the first round pick that they just took out of Duke, so there's an options there too. But when the coaches are telling you that, Sua Opeta is going to be the guy, he's had 10 starts with the Eagles last year. We know how good their offensive line has been. Obviously, you have what is it called? The tush push, or what do they call it in Philly?
I like the brotherly shove. Is
the brotherly shove. That's what I was looking for. So he's got experience getting pushed. Also in the run game, Philadelphia's run game was very good last year. So seemingly that's what it's going to be. I think it's going to be a very interesting thing to pay attention to in training camp this year. There's not very many other spots that you could look across the Bucs roster and be like, this is kind of a battle that we're looking towards or looking at, because most of those spots are really filled, other than possibly the nickel spot on the defensive side of the ball, that you can really look at that with 3 guys kind of vying for that spot, especially with the pickup of Tyke Smith there from Georgia in the draft to go along with Tavier Thomas and Christian Izien. So I think it's going to be fun to watch these guys kind of battle it out, and may the best guy win, because ultimately, like you go back to Colin, your offensive line is only as strong as its weakest link. So you want the strongest guy possible there to go along with what can be a very, very good offensive line if they can all gel and figure things out, head into next season.
Yeah, you said it, man. Training camp will decide it. It's just like who maybe has the lead, who the coaches envision, and it feels to me like Sua Opeta is that guy.
Right now, he's got to be.
And I'm excited to see when they finally get the pads on and you get to see the big hogs up front, like go at it a little bit in practice. We'll be all over it here at Bucs Game Day, of course. We'll have full coverage of training camp and all that good stuff. But we're going to have to wait a little bit longer before we get that kind of look at these guys. So until then, speculation mode can roll along. Caleb, you wrote a piece about Baker Mayfield quarterback ranking. I think it was CBS. Where did CBS rank Baker Mayfield amongst his peers in terms of NFL quarterbacks, man?
Yeah, 20th out of 32 quarterbacks in the league, which is crazy because he was in the top 10 in numerous categories following the 2023 season, albeit you can look at it and say, well, there's guys like Joe Burrow were out. I'm just saying this, Daniel Jones was out. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers, some big name guys. Anthony Richardson also out for a majority of the year. Kirk Cousins later on in the season. So a lot of quarterback injuries happened last year. So maybe that's why you kind of saw maybe a little bit of inflated stats because of that. But at the same time, you saw what Baker was able to do to the Buccaneers team. we always harp on the moxie. We always go about the way he carries himself, the teammate that he is, all this, the swagger, this, that of Baker. But he kind of rejuvenated his career. You forget about that. Dave Canales had a little bit to do with that, but it was also Baker. Baker knew he had to prove it. So, some of the guys that were ahead of him just didn't really make sense. I had pointed out, Kirk Cousins in Atlanta. I kind of got a little stuff for that one because we do know Kirk Cousins is a pretty, good quarterback in the league, but what's he going to be like in Atlanta? Is he going to be the Vikings Kirk Cousins, or is he going to be the Washington Commanders Kirk Cousins? It's to be determined there. You got Trevor Lawrence above Baker, who did have a one good season on their run into the playoffs, but last season probably lost them more games than he won them. So that's very questionable for me as well. I forget some other names that were ahead of him, but
Russell Wilson, no?
Russell Wilson literally one spot ahead of Baker and 19th spot just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me at all, especially with him aging, kind of getting pushed out of Denver and heading over there to Pittsburgh. So it's questionable to me when a guy who finishes as a top 10 quarterback the year before gets disrespected and falls 10 spots. It goes back to the Jason Light comments. That's just how it is. That's just how it is when you're with the Bucs. And I think people kind of want to see Baker prove it again. Was this just like, oh, I got to earn a contract, so now I'm going to ball out type deal? Or is this going to be something that he can kind of build some continuity off of and continue his top play that he had last year and kind of boost the Bucs even further into the playoffs than they did in 2023?
Very interesting. For sure. The Russell Wilson one is absurd. I mean,
it's questionable.
The Broncos,
so questionable.
The Broncos are paying like what feels like hundreds of millions of dollars for him to go away. And you're saying he's better than a guy who was a quarter away from taking his team to an NFC championship when they were expected to win 2 football games by a lot of people. I mean, come on now.
The only thing I can put through my head is oh, wow, you're pairing it with Mike Tomlin. Maybe this is a good thing for Russell Wilson, which I can see, maybe the Sean Payton, Russell Wilson thing wasn't going to be it. Russ couldn't cook anymore. So, maybe you pair him with a guy like Mike Tomlin will be able to get the best out of him. Still, that's kind of projecting. And I don't like to project. I kind of like to look and see what has happened, especially recently, to be able to see what we're heading into next year. But a lot of these guys that are ahead of him, possibly were injured last year. So Joe Burrow was at 4, which I'm okay, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves quite yet. I know he went to the Super Bowl and all this stuff. So, but let's.
I got no issue with Joe Burrow in the top 5, dude. I got to just say that.
That's fine. I love Joe Burrow. Don't get me wrong. He's a top 10 quarterback, but I think they were kind of just mixed up. It was kind of like throwing, poop at a wall. Ultimately, is let's see what sticks and see what people have to say about it. Again, we're so far out from the start of the regular season, so it doesn't really matter. But just interesting to see what people's thoughts are on Baker heading into the 2024 season.
Now, I imagine a lot of people watching this, a lot of Bucs fans took the time. Maybe they didn't take all 12 hours it took to watch it, but I imagine they set aside a little bit of time to watch the greatest roast of all time on Netflix. First live roast on Netflix, I think, of Tom Brady. Dude, did you watch it? I assume you watched most of it, all of it, because that was wild, dude. That was some outlandish. I was like, what? They just said the head off. My God.
From start to finish, I watched the whole 3-hour special, and it was out of pocket the entire time. It was I thought it couldn't get worse, and then it got worse. And then it got worse, and then it got worse, and it got worse. And I was just this is unbelievable. And Netflix all of a sudden grew some cojones and was we're going to put something on like this because this is completely against any of their MO from what we've seen in the past. So it was shocking to see some of these people come out and say some of these things because you never saw it really. Obviously, Gronk's gonna bring that aspect of it. But you see guys like Julian Edelman or Drew Bledsoe. I didn't know Drew Bledsoe had some of that up his sleeves. And then obviously
He's been waiting for this, dude. Are you kidding me? Drew Bledsoe's been writing this for 25 years.
I mean, it was incredible. I thought it was very well done. Brady didn't know any of the jokes coming in, which was fantastic. So I know the Buccaneers aspect of his career didn't get a ton of love, but that's probably because most of what has happened, like that is questionable about Tom Brady's career, comes from his time in New England. So I thought it was a great thing. I thought the comedians absolutely crushed it. I think Tony Hinchcliffe did an amazing job. Him and Nikki Glazer absolutely crushed it. Really put the cancel culture, whatever you want to call it, on notice. So be it. But it was very amazing to see all these people come together, absolutely crush it in what they did. Even the guys, even the football players, being able to put forward jokes and things of that nature. And Brady being a good sport. Other than the one Robert Kraft joke that John Ross told in the beginning, but overall it was a great experience. I'm probably gonna watch it again at some point. But yeah, your thoughts, Colin? I don't know if you watched the whole thing, but I did.
I did in segments. Like I didn't watch it all in one go, but I'm with you on Nikki Glazer. I thought had hers hit the hardest. Like she was fantastic. She was ridiculous. She just came out seasoned perfect. She looked like Tom Brady, in the fourth quarter. Like she was ready to rock. And then that Hinchcliffe dude was like, I'm not super up on comedians. So Tony Hinchcliffe, pardon me, was highly efficient. Like just boom, 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 boom. He wasn't wasting any time between jokes.
He got everybody. He got literally everybody that was there. I was like, oh my God, like he memorized this like completely all the way through.
Yeah. And then of the athletes though, right? Like you see why they spread out the athletes or whoever is roasting who's not a comedian with the comedians is because they got to make sure it stays high quality. But I thought Julian Edelman's was like really strong personally. I thought
he had some things to get off his chest, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. But like, dang, like it was crazy, man. Out of pocket's the word, like you said. Anyway, on that note, I think Caleb, this is a great time for us to head on out of here. So first off, I want to just once again thank Thor Nystrom for coming through, giving us his time. Guys got requests to be on every show, every radio station, everywhere. So he's a busy man, but he gave us his time. He gave it for you Bucs fans. So I hope you make sure to like and follow his work at Thor KU. The same goes for us, right? Why not? So Colin Hallboom, Caleb Skinner, you see our Twitter handles on screen. If you're listening to the podcast version, I can be followed at SI_Buccaneers, Caleb at CHS Knoll. And every day, all 365 of them throughout the year, we are pumping out content over at Bucs Game Day, which is Sports Illustrated's only website dedicated specifically to covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We got credentialed coverage all year round, training camp, draft, season, playoffs, you name it, we got it. Please make sure you subscribe to this new YouTube channel we've just launched. We had Rashad White on the show last week, Thor Nystrom on the show this week. Lots of great guests in store. Our boy JC Allen's he got the night off, but he'll be back. And we look forward to talking Tampa Bay Buccaneers football right up until the season, and it'll only heat up from there. So thanks for joining us, folks. Till next time, be well. Go Bucs.